Do your games groups hold out stability week over week over week, or do you have troubles maintaining your player base for the same amount of period? Hi, I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is Game Master's Guide, and I'm going to be talking today about the elements of games that can maintain continuity and improve your ability to keep your games group together. As a game master with more than 50 years of game mastery experience now, I'm endeavoring to help you as a game master wherever you are to have the best game sessions you can possibly have and bring to you the joy and excitement that I've had as being a game master for that long. So this opening salvo is going to be on the very subject of continuity. And as a quick note, you may see this message pop up on several of the screens. The Masterbook has finally become available, and the link will be in the description on YouTube as soon as we get this uploaded. So just realize you can get a hold of the book there. You can also find more information and the fast play of NycosRPG on the NycosRPG.com website. So let's get started into this subject. When we talk about continuity, what I'm referring to is the consistency of the story that you're telling week over week over week. And whether that be specifically serial one-shots where each of the singular sessions is a standalone game and you're merely linking them together one after the other, or if you are talking about a series of adventures that are intended to tell a limited story, or if you're talking about, as I have done generally speaking, the concept of running your games on a week over week basis as a campaign. All three of them have issues of continuity you want to maintain. Now, some players and some game masters that host games for them have instead a limited continuity because they simply are running different characters each session, or they're switching between different tiers of levels, so to speak, from week to week. And those have a different level of continuity, a little different approach to this, and I would actually call that consistency over continuity. But nonetheless, the idea of your sessions being uniform in the feel, or uniform in the environment, or uniform in the world that you're playing in, these are essentially great tools for keeping players playing week over week, because the desire to hear the next chapter or become a part of the next section or to watch the development over time. All three of these are elements that support this idea of continuity / consistency. So let's talk only in particular about the singularities, the singletons, the one-shots. Maintaining consistency week over week means that you hold to the same rulings, game session over game session, that you hold to perhaps the same locale, perhaps the same game world. And all of these are elements that help to keep that continuity, that consistency week over week, even as the game evolves and adapts session over session. When you're talking about a series, or in particular a saga, the long scale events, the element of continuity has more to do with maintaining facts week over week. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And then finally, when we talk about continuity, it's the staying power. How long can you as a game master maintain a specific story without a break, without a change in venue, perhaps a change in environment? And there are ways even to handle those that we'll talk about as well. Now, when we're talking about keeping a consistency week over week, there are certain elements that are useful for helping it, and there are those that are harmful to maintaining the continuity. So, for example, if you are switching out characters on a weekly basis and you're doing a one shot at different levels at different times, these these concepts of consistency or continuity will kind of be put under assault by the very things that work on a campaign basis. And in particular, I'm talking about something that I've come to lovingly call the member berries. And I know this is a term that has been bandied about. I've heard it on several different websites. The idea of the memory of the players being tickled by things that happened that remind them of other things that have happened in the past. So if you're playing a group that are one-shot oriented, it's a little more dangerous to use member berries in your game. So in other words, if you play a scene and there's something in that scene that triggers a memory, the players may divert and pursue that conversation, even though they have nothing to do with the game that you're currently running. And so you have to be really careful to hold down or hold in control these member berries. On the other hand, if you have a campaign or a long series of events, then the idea of having people remember what happened in previous weeks is really kind of critical and important. And so therefore, not necessarily the fomentation, you don't have to draw it out and focus on it, but players who will draw upon these memories are they're triggering their own joy in the game, so that's not a bad thing. But it's not necessarily directly a continuity glue. But the continuity glue is kind of like a paste. It gets a mixture of all of these. So some memberberry activity, and a friend of mine actually called it memberberry jam. It was a very funny thought process that you're actually blending all the different memories that they've had about the game in a way to keep them pursuing it. Perhaps it's a villain they remember defeating. Perhaps it's a situation they remember being engaged with. The idea here is that the thought and processes of their brains in the interaction between you and them does tend to lend itself to this concept of remember when this happened, remember when that happened, and the like. Now, this is only a piece of this element because the idea of continuity glue is literally the pieces that hold the adventure together week over week. The one I didn't post here is actually something I call OSSF, which is Our Story So Far. And it's one of my elemental tools when I begin an adventure on a given week. I will remind the players where we are. I will call for them to remember what was going on so that we literally start where we left off or as close as memory will allow. Of course, this very element of the remembrance of the games itself is subject to our own will or our own concept of what that is, and so therefore we can actually find ourselves adjusting the story as our memories may differ from what really happened. And I only discovered this actually when I started live streaming my episodes 4 years back, which are available at NycosRPG. You can go to that on YouTube and find the older recorded episodes, and you'll find that a session will end in a certain way, and then the following week, as we're doing our story so far, remembrance of what happened, the very memory itself has been adjusted or changed. For example, I have a tough time remembering which accent I was using with which NPC. But if the players still acknowledge and identify that player, that persona with that voice, even if that may have not been the exact speech pattern I'd used the week before, it still becomes a bridge and therefore tends to enhance and hold together the story because they do remember the NPC. Which brings to the next point, the idea of keeping and recognizing your recurring NEPs, which is my term for NPCs. You'll find that I balk at the very use of the term NPC because it's been so diluted and made flat, so that the non-enjoined personality really just means the new person that they're engaging with. And if it's a recurring one, if they can feel that continuity, if they can recognize and hold on to that, it tends to make them want to be a part of the story. They may even want to find out what's happened week over week with that NEP. Same thing with the story NEPs. If a person has brought them information in the story and now they want to refer to what they learned at those last times, they want to reconnect with those NEPs. This is very important to the continuity of the game because it needs to feel like the same place and the same location and the same time period and so on. This also means that your settings and your scenes can be memory triggers and also create the awareness of where a group is. For example, we've had a group that's been in the city of Nyx for several weeks and even a couple of months. And when that happens, you have to keep refreshing what that city looks like, what its elemental divisions are, so that they can see them. And if they shift and adapt, unless you've got a story reason for that to happen, you can cause it to become unsettled and players become a little dissatisfied or disconnected from the story. And the main thing is that you have to maintain an essence of general familiarity. In other words, if they have been operating out of a certain region and things are changing in the world, their home familiarity should still draw them back into the story at that point to keep them connecting week over week. Now, these elements are not necessarily required to be something that was written out well in advance. In fact, matter of fact, many of the scenes that play out in a role-play game will be brought on more from the GM's creativity within the framework, but it just means you have to make sure that you follow your own boundaries and limits to that location so that the players will feel like they're part of the scene. Now, do remember, if you haven't watched this before, check out our website at NycosRPG.com for information on the game series and the schedules that we're holding. Also, make sure you like and follow this channel to make sure that you get access to the updates of this, and definitely you want to subscribe to YouTube to make sure that you are related whenever new updates are brought onto the site, and also to keep us help us maintain it as a daily channel. And particularly, we'd love to have you comment and give us some feedback on the presentations that we're doing to make sure that we're reaching out with the right information for you. So now we're going to talk about what you can do to become a part of this organization and how to keep your games running smoothly. NycosRPG has an entire playlist for specifically how the game is played that I recommend you check that out. You also want to download the fast play mechanisms, which are also in the discussion below. Make yourself a persona utilizing the downloadable persona packet, and explore NycosRPG.info for more information on the lore of the world of Nykos, so that the stories that I tell on Tuesdays, the Nykos Nightly News, make sense. You'll also want to check out, if you're a game master, you want to check out our GM Academy playlist, which is all of the episodes that I've made so far that are intended to help you be a better game master, regardless of the genre or the game system that you're using. And also check out the toolbox episodes, because those actually give the keys and tools that will help you to make your games more exciting, more accessible to your players. And of course, if you want to become a part of our community, join patreon.com/Nykos, and in that process, you gain access to our Discord channel, which gives you the ability to play in our Patreon games on the weekend. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some storytelling basics and how those can make your game more continuous. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about how sessions are different from series and series are different from sagas, but these next tips and recommendations are things that will really help to glue in the continuity. First one of those are the use of table tents. Now, the concept of a table tent is merely a 3x5 card folded along the horizontal basis so that you're folding in landscape style, and then you allow the players to put their character names on the front of them. They can put additional information if they want to, species and such, but it's mainly there as a memory tool for the other players. Now, in all candor, I've been GMing for 50 years, and I've been using table tents for the majority of that time. And what I found that's really useful in doing so is that the players get to know each other's names as characters and therefore become more personal in their interactions, because they can say, hey, I'm talking to Lorathal across the room, so Lorathal, you want to listen in particular because this is a conversation I want to have with you, and then you just let them go hog wild on the role play. But this mechanism of table tents is the first and most useful. Now, if you're using the Dungeons and Dragons mechanism of inspiration, this also is an incitement for the players to come back week over week, because I allow them to have a bonus inspiration or a reroll if they brought their name tag week over week. And what I found is that they end up making these really ornate. I've got one player who uses her 3D printer, not her 3D printer, her color printer, and so she makes very stylized calligraphic forms of the names of the characters, and so they're big and bold and very easily to understand. As a matter of fact, she makes them out of 8.5 by 11 paper, so they're much larger table tents. But it's kind of like in the United Nations, they have each country and each representative has their name tag in front of them. And I even have some people who have gone to the level of making it semi-permanent by having plastic inserts or whatever to make their table tents stand out and stand up more clearly. And I always have them so they face them towards the group and also towards me, so that I can draw attention to or address them by their persona names. So much so that in all candor, my games, I tend to know my players by their persona names. Now, if it's the same player playing in multiple sessions week over week, as in my case, they have to bring their name tags, or else I might confuse who they are playing in a given session because I've got so many games going on. But the idea here is that the name tag is the first tool that I highly recommend, because once they use their name tag in the game to get that inspiration, they simply put their name tag face down. So by that time, hopefully you've got a good memory of who's playing whom, but more importantly, you've got a way to identify that their name tag inspiration roll has already happened. So I highly recommend that. Second thing that I would recommend if you're looking for building continuity is to make sure that you build into your story, your main story arc, plenty of smaller character arcs, so that the characters feel invested in the story, and therefore the actions that they hope to accomplish will be part of the overall story. So, for example, I had a group just recently get to spend some time in a major city, and it was their first time doing so for a long time. And for the first 3 or 4 days of their engagement, they were still in that rather combat-focused mode and working on, they were dealing with people as if they were still in the risky outer environment. And when they came to realize that they were in a safe place and could actually utilize the shopping mechanisms and actually get involved with local dialogue and dramatis, it really helped, because then now they are anchored into not only that place, but they feel more comfortable because they are acting normal again. And so therefore the transition from one game type to another becomes your means of keeping them interested, so that yes, they don't get too programmed to always be in a fighting mode, but actually then understand that they are now in a drama mode or a puzzle solving mode, or in the case of the group right now, in the military planning stage, where they're actually working not only with their own persona, but with the extension of military action and their roles as commanders. So that's a second thing. A third tool for keeping characters involved in the story is to have what I historically called the debrief. As a matter of fact, I'm utilizing my debriefing room, so I have a couple of players that are in theory actually listening to this broadcast in that mode as members of my Discord team, so therefore they get to hear it in its rawest form and get to actually watch how the process works to create episodes. And so that's yet another reason to become a member of a Patreon account, is that you get to get some behind the scenes benefits as well. That also includes what I was referring to when I talk about the debrief. If you have a time element wherein you can have the players take some time to decompress, to kind of go over the things that happened in the session, talk about what they liked, what they didn't like, what they would have preferred to see more of, and the like, you're giving the players more agency than just merely being good players in the game, but they are also become your advisors as a storyteller and creator, so that you get an idea of what they are looking for in the game sessions, and that really helps with continuity. Another element of the continuity process is to have a mutual resource that the players can draw upon that provides them information on what's happened in the past. One of the biggest challenges is that when you play in a role-play game, you are usually so invested in it that you are focusing on what happened in that session, and literally your as my grandfather would say, your brains are leaking out of your ears, because you are get to the point where you've got so much overload of new information that you really haven't had time to process it. So having the debrief process along with a mutually shared file location where they can gather those clues and evidences going back and back and back, it really gives them a chance to see their lives in the roles of their characters over the passages of time. This helps to enhance their role play because they feel like they are whole or complete beings, and they're also able to really drill down into what has happened in the past in order to see what they might want to do in the future. So, for example, they might have found an old note that reminds them that they have been working on their horseback riding for several months. Then they have gotten into a fighting situation where the steeds weren't around, but now they're back out of that. And so by having that note back in the records, they can then embrace that concept and start to work to really connect their game into the story. Finally, the one additional tool I would add to this is that I interview them from time to time. As a matter of fact, we just did this a couple of nights ago, where I brought the players from one of the games group onto the show, and we actually did a recap in character of what was going on and getting some information on their plans in such a way that they are able to provide for themselves visually through the episode some Easter eggs that they might find later interesting and then draw off of and play with in future episodes. After you look at the concept of all of these different tools, the next thing, of course, is to establish a output from them. And in my case, since I've written into the story that the poetry and songs of the group become a part and parcel of the future history of the world of Nykos, then the players are the ones who actually create the prophecies, the prognostications of the story from where they sit in the game. Now, this is a somewhat of a two-edged sword, because I'm utilizing that information for processing what may happen literally 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because my campaigns run so long. We're talking about a 7-year campaign. So players sort of look forward to when their own words come back to bite them, so to speak. And so this is a way of keeping them playing month after month, year after year. Now, that doesn't mean my games group stays consistent. One of the other things that really is important is to maintain continuity over new additions and new changes to the games group. And to do that, you literally have to build in the transfer of information so that my debrief file becomes accessible to my new player, so he can find out what's happened in the past, so he can see where his part or where his direction in the game might come from. And it isn't that I'm mandating it, it's not a railroad mechanism. Instead, it's more of a sandboxy process where they look at it and decide where they feel their merit should be playing into the game session. So that's a handful of tools that I would recommend for improving your sessions, your series, or your sagas set week after week and ongoing. All right, so the next thing they have to worry about in terms of continuity is their persona. Now, if you have played role play games in a traditional sense, you know that generally the game master provides experience points that the players then allocate to whichever class or uh, pathway they want to pursue. And especially with the advent of the fifth iteration, or fifth edition, then the persona character sheet shows the path that they took to get to where they've gotten to. And in the NycosRPG mechanism, the persona sheet details are very much elements of that. Granted, your base numbers and your core never change, but your choice of skills becomes a matter of growth and advancement on an ongoing basis. And since the players are in control of that, they have the opportunity to look at their player sheet, to their persona sheet, to see what they were advancing and keep track of that. Now, we utilize a percentage-based mechanism. The system is internally self-controlled, so that the players are the ones who pass that course. But the concept of, for example, a return to their roots, a return to their own people, so to speak, provides them means for gaining additional skills under the culture and the values mechanisms. So things that they valued when they were youngsters as persona may impact what they choose to do as later developed personas. And this structure therefore allows them to maintain their personal continuity, and in holding on to that, they then are looking to the story to support and promote that as well. And so by having this, you can allow for high fantasy, high power numbers, or perhaps you start them at relatively low numbers, so you can build in a low fantasy environment, or maybe even a survivalist process. In any case, as they advance, they are growing within the game mechanism and therefore are maintaining their continuity. Okay, so the end of the matter is this. We want our games groups to hold week over week. I mean, unless you are a one-shot master and that's all you do, the idea of players changing week over week is something that the players need to evolve, and therefore you need to maintain the ability for them to hold to the truth of the world that they are in. And these consistencies lend themselves to the continuity of your story, to the point where you can build in the very mechanisms that make them want to come back week over week. I can say that I think my own history bears this out. I have been playing and running games in the role play environment since 1974, and each of the arcs generally takes between 6 and 7 years to play through. The ability to have one group carry through all of that is astonishing. To have players that want to run multiple series and run through dozens of years, that's pretty much unheard of for most game masters. But the reality is that the continuity that the players get from the game leads them to build their own continuous desire, and therefore allow them to restart campaign after campaign with new characters, with new dynamics that they are also wanting to pursue into the future. Having said that, we are in our 9th iteration. As a matter of fact, NycosRPG was written right at the beginning of that 9th iteration, and so therefore the things that happen in my campaign are already starting to metamorphose beyond the very mechanism of rules. But I had to make sure that the rules of NycosRPG are consistent enough that you can play iteration after iteration and not have to change out rules mechanisms. The idea here is that the Masterbook for NycosRPG covers the basics that would cover any genre, any period, any iteration. And then the advancements that are found in the system books, such as Dark Shards, cover specifically the advancements in that particular genre. And even with that genre becomes resilient enough that it can hold session after session, saga after saga, and the rise and fall of the story and the characters becomes a very much natural and desirable facet of the game mechanism. So having said that, we've come to the end of the matter, and therefore we are completed for this episode of NycosRPG. I want to thank you for being here. I made it right at the 30-minute mark, so I feel like I've accomplished what I was trying to do. If you have any questions, please include those in the comments section. If there are things that you can think of that maybe we should have included, feel free to do that as well, because I'd love to have a conversation. Hey! And thank you so much for Pixie Palette becoming a follower. Yay! Glad to have you with us. And if you want to know more information, check out NycosRPG.com for the information about the property. If you want to understand about the genre and the lore, you can get little snippets from the NycosRPG.info, which is my World Anvil page. And then finally, also, if you want to get a real feel for this, go back and watch all the episodes that I did on Tuesday evenings at 11 p.m. Those episodes tend to be my Nykos Nightly News, and this gives you information on what's going on with the campaigns right now as they are across the 4 games that I'm currently running. For information on how you can become a part of that, check out patreon.com/Nykos, and we will talk to you in the next episode. Have a great night.